Shalom, my dear friends. Shalom. It's certainly good to be back here in Jerusalem and able to be in my office studio from which I can communicate to you from the holy city of Jerusalem, into which I'm now, Baruch Hashem, settled after my travels to London, England, to visit my mother, whom I left in stable condition and in very caring hands. So Baruch Hashem, good to be back here and to beginning today two whole new worlds of study in our Tanakh studies and in our Mishnah studies. And today we'll be beginning the in the Tanakh section, the book of Mishley, to which we will turn very presently. And book of Mishley, that is King Solomon's Proverbs, which has long been my ambition to study and to be able to study online and to share with you ideas about this most amazing and remarkable work. And then we're also studying the new Tractate of Hullin, which deals with the subject of Shchita and with the subject of many aspects of general kashrut, and as we shall see, there are many aspects of this tractate which are most relevant to our lives today. And so with that, let me turn to our study of the book of Mishley, King Solomon's Proverbs. Here we have in front of us the opening verses of the book of Mishlei Shlomo, the parables, proverbs of Solomon. And with the help of God, we shall be studying the first 9 chapters of Proverbs in the coming weeks, which serve as a general introduction to the entire work. And the bulk of Proverbs from chapter 10 until almost the end of the book is in almost a single format, and that is of one verse pearls of King Solomon's wisdom, covering every aspect of human life and the world. Most amazing diversity of proverbs, which when reading chapter after chapter, in many cases many appear to have no connection with one another, but each one of them is a universe in itself, calling for a deep exploration and investigation. Well, this is not so with the first 9 chapters of Proverbs. From chapters 1 through the end of 9, Proverbs is a series of discourses calling us to wake up and understand our existential condition in this world, and to understand that we need to be guided by the wisdom of the wise in order to make the very best of our lives in this world. So as we shall be seeing presently, this is the content of the first 9 chapters. Following from there on, from chapter 10 through to the end of chapter 24, the series of almost completely single format, one verse each, pearls of wisdom, some 30 or more verses to a chapter, one after the other, coming at us. And then at the beginning of chapter 25, there is a very interesting verse that tells us that these are the Proverbs of King Solomon that were edited or redacted at a later date by the men of King Hezekiah, who was a descendant of King Solomon and king in Jerusalem in the time of the siege of Sennacherib of Ashur over against Jerusalem, which was miraculously overturned. And Hezekiah, who was living at the time of Isaiah, appears as one of the endeavors of his great revivalist reign in Judah and over Israel as it was in his time, which covered the very exile of the 10 tribes. Apparently Hezekiah's scholars and scribes took from manuscripts of other parables handed down from King Solomon that hitherto had not been known more widely or published. And this goes on towards the very end of the book, where the last chapters of Proverbs turn into, again, a form of a discourse far more covered over with layer after layer, very, very obscure verses that can only begin to be fathomed with the help of Agadah, with tales handed down by the rabbinical tradition. So this leads to the very conclusion of Mishley, which is the well-known chapter of Eshet Chayil, the woman of valor, that is recited in Jewish homes on Friday night, just prior to the Kiddush of Friday night, the last chapter of Mishley, which is also a praise of our matriarchs, Sarah Imenu, Sarah, our mother, and the other matriarchs of Israel, and is a praise of the Shabbat and a praise of the Shekhinah, the divine indwelling presence. And that is the climax of Mishley, this book of Proverbs. Well, it is my intention, with the help of God, to study the first 9 chapters, and with the help of God, the concluding chapters of Mishley, but not at this stage to go into all of the chapters from 10 through to nearly the end of the book that are one after the other, these incredible pearls of wisdom which you could never stop considering each one of them and debating and exploring further. But I do have an ulterior motive in studying now the first 9 chapters and just a few others of Mishley, because this is intended in my mind as a preparation for going to what I consider one of the greatest works of all of the Bible that applies to each and every one of us and is worth studying in its entirety and is so very difficult to understand, and that is the book of Job. And as is my custom when studying Tanakh, before coming to the big 3, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, I like to first study the TORAH, the 12, because that way you get an introduction to the ways of prophecy, which in each case of the 12 so-called minor prophets is relatively short compared to the very lengthy prophecies of the big 3, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. And likewise here, I do consider the book of Job to be a major endeavor of Bible study for us, which will lead to, I think, some incredibly comforting, wise insights and understandings. And in this sense, the book of the introduction to Mishley is going to serve as an introduction also to the deep parable of the book of Job. The book is made up of parable and story, and all revolves around the very word that is the first word of our coming book of Mishley. Mishley Shlomo ben David Melech Yisrael. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. Lo da'as chochmo umusor, to understand wisdom and reproof. Lehovin imrei vino, to understand the sayings of understanding. Lokachas musar haskil, to take reproof of wisdom, wise reproof. Tzedek, justice. Umishpat, equity. Umeisharim, the straight ways of justice. Loseis lefesoim ormo, to give to the simple, subtle, crafty wisdom. Lenar das umezimo, to the lad just starting off, knowledge and initiative, mezima, ability to plan and understand how to do things. Yishma chochom v'yosef lekach, they shall hear the wise shall hear, and he will add the portion that he takes from this wisdom, the benefit. He will add benefit from what he hears. V'novon tachbulois yikne, the person of understanding will acquire crafty stratagems to be able to survive and conquer in this world. Lehovin moshol umelitzo, to understand mashal, the proverb, the metaphor, the image used with which to evoke and compare the deep, deep wisdom. Umelitzo, to understand the melitza, which is the eloquence of the language used, which is perfectly fit to the subject it is to express. Divrei chachomim, the words of the wise, the sages. V'chidoisam, their secret mysteries. Yiras Adonai Reshis Doas, it is the awe of Hashem that is the beginning of knowledge. Chochma umusor, however, wisdom and reproof. Evilim bazu, the fools, the wicked, the evil, that you see in the Hebrew word evilim, the evil have despised wisdom and reproof. Well, here we have the opening parasha of Iyov. The first 7 verses make up a parasha in themselves, a paragraph. The expression parasha is more than a paragraph. It's a paragraph in which all of the components are interconnected. And here we have the opening call. Traditionally, the text of Mishley in the parchments and in our printed versions is printed with the large letter Mem. The large letter Mem, according to the Midrash, signifies that King Solomon fasted for 40 days in order to attain the wisdom to which he gives expression in the book of Mishley. The letter Mem of Mishley is the middle letter of the word Emet, truth. And the 3 books of Iyov, Job, Mishley, Proverbs, and Tehillim, the Psalms, those 3 whose initial letters are Aleph, Mem, Taf, they spell out the word Emet. And these 3 books are known as the Emet literature. And a word about the concept of the Mishlei Mashal. We looked at this subject in our early discussions of the book of Daniel, when we looked also into Maimonides in the Laws of the Foundations of the Torah, where he speaks about prophecy, and there he speaks about how the whole of prophecy is to be understood as a series of mishalim, of metaphors, through which the prophet evokes the message that he is giving over. Maimonides there in Yesodei HaTorah, the Laws of the Foundations of the Torah, speaking, the prophet cites, for example, the almond, the budding almond branch of Jeremiah and the seething pot at the beginning of Jeremiah, and also some of the very graphic images to be found in, for example, Zechariah, illustrating the meaning of this word mashal, the metaphor. And as we discussed there, two key concepts are the concepts of the mashal itself, the image, the metaphor, and the nimshal, that which the image of the mashal is throwing light upon. The nimshal is the thing that is being reflected, being symbolized. The verbal grammatical form of nimshal is nif'al, where the intrinsic thing is being influenced by that which is being held up to compare to the nimshal. So every mashal, which in English we translate as the word proverb, is itself a metaphor, a way of giving expression to some deeper concept. And the depth of the mashalim of Mishley is seen from particularly the Holy Zohar, where the Zohar shows us that way beneath the level of the apparent surface meaning of the text are all kinds of esoteric messages and teachings that are embedded in the text. And this is apparent very much so in the opening parasha of Mishley, that I'd now like to look at a second time and discuss in more detail some of the main concepts that are appearing here. Mishlei Shlomo, we already have discussed the meaning of the word Mishlei itself. That is the outer visible metaphor coming to convey the inner nimshal, and he has his authority as being Ben David Melech Israel, son of David, known to us all. And Shlomo is coming to lead the people of Israel in the ways of true wisdom. The purpose of all these Mishlei, these proverbs, is lo da'as chochmo u'musor, to know wisdom and reproof. Lehovin imrei vino, to understand the words of binah, understanding. Well, here in this second verse of Mishlei, we have three of the 10 sfirot of the Kabbalah that are at the very top of the tree. The whole Torah is about the eating of the fruit of the book of knowledge, the fruit of the tree of the of knowledge of good and evil. And here Shlomo is inviting us to repair that flaw by coming to da'as chochmo, the knowledge of wisdom. To know wisdom, we are restoring da'as, which is the concept of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We're restoring our knowledge, our intellect, to the level of chokhmah. I don't know quite what the word chokhmah means to you the word wisdom in English. These words mean different things to different people. When somebody uses the expression the wise or wisdom, in some cases it's talking about people's understanding of practically how to live in this world, the wisdom of the heart, the wisdom of the school of hard knocks. Sometimes others may be thinking of some monks in some monastery way up in the mountains with libraries of scrolls. And let us therefore consider what we can understand of the terms in this key verse from the tradition of the Kabbalah. Lo da'as, to know, well, here the expression da'as is the center column of the tree of life. Knowledge and consciousness and awareness. Chokhmah is at the top of the tree. It is the top right, the head of the right column. And the word Chokhmah is made up of the Hebrew words koach, kofchet, koach, strength, power, potential. Ma, what? That is to say, whatever it is, there is a power behind what is. And King Shlomo is inviting us to come to a knowledge, what is this power? Musar, it's not going to just involve intellectual knowledge, it's going to involve a reproof. Liaser is to whip or to chastise people, and Musar is the chastisements of the words of the wise, telling us to wake up, open our eyes, and get our acts together. Lehovin, to go further, to understand. The havin is from the Hebrew root bin, which means between, to distinguish between. Understanding means the ability to discriminate between one thing and another, to understand the details as they fit together. Lehavin imrei vino, to understand the words of binah, the words that reflect true understanding. We're being asked to do two things: to know the wisdom, to know the chokhmah, and to understand words of understanding. Here we see this pasuk, this verse, like so very many throughout this book, and indeed throughout much of the wisdom literature and the Torah. These verses in Proverbs so often are made up of a kind of a thesis and an antithesis. There is one side of the matter is put, and then the other side of the matter is put. But each of the two halves of the verse also have their antitheses. There is lo da'as chokhmah, to know chokhmah. Lehovin imrei vina, to understand the words, the outer vessel that expresses the inner understanding. So bina is the left column. Bina is the column that puts limitation on things, because bina distinguishes between one thing and another, and therefore defines and demarks boundaries. So these three concepts, Lodas, Chokhmah, Umusar, to know wisdom and reproof. Wisdom and reproof are going to involve one another. They're joined together, because you cannot become wise until you accept the reproof and the chastisement of the wise to get your act together. And then you will be able to understand, Lahavin Imrei Vina, to develop the left-hand column, which is to understand words of profound depth. And this is not purely an intellectual exercise. Now, King Shlomo runs down the tree of the Sfirot, down from the level of the head and the mind, Da'at, Chokhmah, Bina. We go down the tree, Lo kachas musar haskil, to take reproof of wisdom. Well, here the word lokachas introduced a new element. It's the hands that take and receive. The previous verse spoke about knowing in your mind and your heart, but it's the hands that take and accept and receive this musar, this reproof. It's not any reproof, it is a reproof of haskil, wisdom. And here we have introduced another term in rabbinical Kabbalistic psychology of the soul, the sechel, as where Jacob, when he's blessing Menashe and Ephraim, he guides his hands with wisdom to put his left hand on the head of Menashe and his right hand on Ephraim. His scale, sikel, here this root, haskil, is the root of what until today in Hebrew is called the sechel, the intellect, and this would be the more general term covering the three terms, da'at in the center column, chokhmah, the right-hand column, bino, the left-hand column, and haskel would refer to the three together, the triad. So this next verse 2, is telling us to receive the influence of the head and the mind and the soul, to take this musar, haskel, from the level of the intellect and to turn it into action, tzedek, righteousness or charity, mishpat, justice, u'meishorim, the straight path, the straight play, not by crooked ways. So here in these verses, King Solomon is setting forth what is his intention in giving this leadership to the people, to bring the people to the level that will find favor in the eyes of God, to lead lives of tzedek, charity and kindness, mishpat, justice, u'meisharim, the ways of righteousness, straight paths. And it's to educate everybody, losis, lifasoim ormo, to give to the simple, the pure and simple, to give them ormo, cunning. The expression arom in Hebrew in Genesis at the end of chapter 2 and beginning of chapter 3 is used in two interesting ways. Adam and Eve are left at the end of chapter 2 of Genesis, arumim, they are without clothes, and the same Hebrew word has the connotation in the form of orma. Arum also means someone that is cunning. Orma is cunning. Solomon's intention is to teach subtlety to the simple, because this is a very upside down world and you need some cunning to get through. Lena'ar, he wants to teach the na'ar. A na'ar is not just a young person. A na'ar has the connotation of somebody who is, like many young people, somewhat irresponsible and somewhat unthinking. And he wants to give him da'as, this knowledge he has spoken about above, da'as, the knowledge which he shall presently explain what it is. Umezimo, when we studied in the Mishnah, the section of Tractate Makos, speaking about Edim Zomamim, we saw how this root of Zima has to do with somebody who is planning something. And it could be for good and it could be for not good. And we want to teach our young people da'as, true knowledge and competence in being able to get through the world. And he now tells us in the next verse, verse 5, that what he's saying is not simply something that everybody already understands. Yishma hochom v'yosef lekach. The Chacham, he who is already wise, if he will listen, Yosef lekach, he will add lekach. Lekach is what you take away. Lekach is the same root as we had above, that Solomon is teaching us lokachas muso, to take musar. And here he's teaching us the same thing to take lekach, what you come away with, the treasure you come away with. The wise will add, and he will add treasure in all of this pursuit of wisdom. V'navon, the other side of the equation, we had the chacham, the right hand. Now we have navon, the left hand. Tachbulois yikneh. He will acquire tachbulois. Tachbulois would be translated as crafty, cunning ways of working out stratagems to get through, strategies. So again, in this fourth verse, the fifth verse, we have the same balance of the two sides. Yishma chochom v'yosef lekach. They shall hear, listen, the chochom shall listen and increase his treasure. On the other side of the other side, v'navon tahbulois yikneh. The one of understanding will acquire stratagems. Now see again the balance between the way it expressed itself in the beginning of the verse. The first half, we have the verb at the beginning, Yishma hacham. Yosef lekach. There's actually two verbs in the first half of the verse, Yishma and Yosef. You'll hear and increase. So here the verb comes first, and the subject comes second, followed by the second verb relating to that same subject, the chacham. And after the verb comes the object of the verb, Yosef lekach, he shall add the treasure. So in the second half of the verse, it's all elegantly in reverse. V'navon, here the subject, the one of understanding, comes before the verb, which we only hear at the end of the sentence, just as the verb of the first half of the verse was at the beginning of the sentence. Here it's at the end, and the object of the verb comes before the verb, as opposed to in the first half, where the object of the verb lekach came after Vayosef. Here tachbulois comes before the verb. So it's all very elegantly crafted, each verse. Lehovin moshol umelitzo, to understand mashal. Again, the metaphor, the symbol, the outer form, alluding to the deeper thing that is to be understood. Well, melitzo, a new concept here, melitzo would be eloquence. Eloquence is that elegance and beauty of construction, which we've just noted on the previous verse, the elegance of the construction to the point where the mashal and the nimshal fit perfectly together. That is the goal of melitza, of eloquence, to that the idea being expressed is perfectly expressed by the form of words chosen to express it. So here again, the first half of verse 6, to understand metaphor and eloquence, and then continuing with the objects of the verb lahavin. It is this understanding that will bring us to understand the words of the wise, the chachamim. The continuation of the objects were to understand first mashal, then melitza, and then divrei chachamim, the words of the chachamim, who are the bearers of the tradition to which King Solomon is giving expression. V'chidoisam, here the Hebrew singular is Chida, a mystery, a mysterious form of words that contains a deeply embedded message. Chidoisam, their chidot, their mysterious sayings, because the sayings of the wise are so deep that they can only be expressed in through certain mysteries. And what is the summation of this whole introductory parasha? It is the essential teaching that if we want this wisdom, we have to go in through the first gate, and that is Yiras Hashem. It is the fear, the awe, the awareness of Hashem, the one God, maker of heaven and earth. It is this awareness, the foundation upon which the whole edifice of wisdom depends, is this Yiras Hashem Reishis Doas. That is the head, the beginning, as in the first word of the whole Torah, the 5 books of Moses, Bereshis. Here the Reishis, the beginning, the head, the Rosh, the head of Das, the head of knowledge, is Yiras Hashem. It is the awe of God. And as in many cases now at the last concluding verse, suddenly Shlomo turns a very sharp word to those who will have none of this. Chochma u'musar, abruptly we're going to hear that true wisdom and musar, the reproof of the wise, evilim bazu, the evil have despised them, with the implicit message, if you are wise and have your eyes open, you will reject the way of the wicked and rise to the call of King Solomon to follow the path of wisdom. So with that, my friends, we will conclude this section on Mishley, Book of Proverbs, and after a brief interval, we'll go on to our study of the new book of our study, of our Mishnah, which will be the Tractate of Hullin, and links to the English translation of Tractate Hullin are available on the live class page of Azamra website. Shalom and welcome back to our studies today. And today we are going to begin our studies of the Mishnah, Tractate Hullin. Shalom, today the 20th of the month of Cheshvan of the year 5777, corresponding to the 21st of November of the year 2016. And today we embark upon the study of the Tractate Hullin in the Mishnah. Tractate Hullin is the third tractate in the order of Kodoshim, the holy dedicated sacrifices, the fifth order of the Mishnah, which begins with the first tractate, Zivachim, dealing with the slaughter of animal sacrifices in the holy temple. And temple-related subjects are the main theme of all of the tractates of the order of Kodoshim. The second tractate of Kodoshim deals with is entitled Menachos, in the Ivrit pronunciation Menachot, which is the wider laws of the mincha offerings, the flour and other grain offerings, and the wine and oil offerings that were also offered on the altar. And those two first tractates of Kodoshim are a tapestry of temple laws. There is a rather radical, though not a complete, break in our coming tractate of Hullin, whose name is from the Hebrew word chol, which we know as referring to the weekdays as opposed to Shabbat, the holy day of the week. And in Hebrew, the word chol comes from also a root shared with Aramaic, outside of the holy precincts. And much of our tractate will deal with laws of kashrut, which apply in the Israelite Torah home until today. And the tractate has a number of different subjects. The first two chapters are occupied with the subject of shechita, of the slaughter of animals and birds for the purposes of consumption, and this applies in our slaughterhouse and abattoirs until today. Here we have the very foundations of the Torah law of slaughter, which are, I think, of great importance to know and understand in our time because of the attacks that have been launched in our times against the practice of shechita in supposedly civilized and enlightened countries who have sought to legally, in a number of cases in Europe and elsewhere, succeeded in banning the ancient traditional practice of shechita according to the halacha. And this is based on a lack of understanding on the part of lawmakers of just how compassionate this method of slaughter of animals and birds is, and how instantly ends the conscious life of the animal or bird when it's done properly according to the halacha, without any pain or suffering, because of the almost instant loss of consciousness. And this is misunderstood by people who are willing in the slaughterhouses and abattoirs across Europe and North America and elsewhere in the world even more, where controls are even less. The most gruesome of practices are carried out on animals who are struggling in their death throes and are stabbed and tormented in other ways, and nothing could be further from true shechita. So this is another reason why these beginning chapters on this subject are so important for our time, as well as for anybody who wants to truly follow this Torah pathway and to understand what is the meaning of kosher shechita. And for this is the background to our Mishnah. Let us go first to the Chumash and to the verses in Deuteronomy in chapter 12 in the portion of Re'eh, where we have the Torah's reference to Shechita. And this is very important for us to understand as we embark on this tractate, that throughout the subject of Shechita we are dealing with an oral transmission that has come down to us from our fathers and ancestors from Sinai. And here we have explicitly in our verse referred to the verses chapter 12, and the verse in question we must examine is verse 21. In the previous verses of this section, the Torah has been speaking about the bringing of sacrifices to Jerusalem specifically, be it the firstborn animals, be it the maaser animals, the tithe animals, be it peace offerings and burnt offerings. With the building of Jerusalem, all sacrificial animals had to be brought to Jerusalem. And if so, the question arises, is it permitted to consume non-sacrificial meats? And here in our verse, Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 21, we have the Torah answer. Ki yirchak mimacho amokoim, when it shall be far away from you, the place asher yivchar Adonai Elohecho, that the Lord your God shall choose, lasum shemoi sham, to place, let his name dwell there. Vezovachto, you shall slaughter, you may slaughter. The Hebrew word for zevach, a slaughter, is right here. Mi bekorecho, from your bakar, from your cattle, your bulls and cows. Umi tzoinecho, and from your flocks of sheep and goats, the kosher animals, asher nosan Adonai lecho, that the Lord has given you, ka'asher tzivisicho, as I have commanded you. The key phrase here for our purposes, as I have commanded you. Ka'asher tzivisicho ve'ochalto b'shorecho, then you may eat in your gates, b'chol avas nafshecha, according to all the desire of your soul. Kasher tzivisicho, as I have commanded you, refers to the whole oral tradition of the laws of shchita. If you want to do a zevach, a slaughter of one of these animals, and we learn that birds are included, then you must do it as taught by this tradition. This is the tradition of shechita. So I would like to look at our first Mishnah in this tractate all the way through initially, even though we will go back and look in more detail. And let us note that the external apparent surface meaning of the Mishnah is extremely deceptive. And this is characteristic of the Mishnah, whose true meaning and implications can only be discerned through the analyses of the rabbis in the Talmud. Maseches Hullin, the tractate that deals with Hullin, the non-holy, the profane slaughter of meat and allied subjects. It deals with all of these Hullin that are not specifically temple-dedicated sacrifices, as has been the case in the previous two tractates of the order of Kodoshim, the holy dedicated temple matters. And the Mishnah says, Perek Aleph, the first chapter, Mishnah Aleph, Hakol Shoichatin, all may slaughter, Ushechitason Keshero, and their shechita, their slaughter, would be keshera, would be kosher, edible for Israelite consumption. Chutz mi cheresh, except for a cheresh, that is a person that is mute, the person cannot hear and therefore cannot also talk normally, and they cannot hear instructions and teachings. The second category whose slaughter is not kosher would be the shoteh, a person who is unbalanced mentally. Shoteh, he is mad. V'koton, a minor. Here we have three categories that again and again show up across the whole of the Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, the sixth order of the Mishnah. The three, the cheresh, the deaf mute, the shoteh, the madman, unbalanced person, v'koton, a young person, they cannot be trusted with this holy act which God has put into the hands of Israel through the tradition he has given us there in the verse in Deuteronomy. They cannot be entrusted with this. Shemo yikalkelu v'shchitoson, lest they spoil through their shechita. As we shall see, the details of the method of shechita, the slaughter of the animal, are ramified and complex, and only one who understands all that is involved, all of the details of the procedure, is able to actually perform a kosher shechita. And we shall come back later to the opening words of our mission and see that the plain meaning, which would seem to imply that, well, anybody could just take a knife and cut the animal's throat and that's it, it's kosher. That is not what it means. But let us go forward in our Mishnah to first look at the plain meaning. B'chulon sheshochatu, all of them, sheshochatu, if they already did it, if they already shechted, they already slaughtered, v'acherem ro'in oison, others saw them do it, others who understood what had to be done and could assess if it was being done properly. If others were watching, shchitason keshero, their slaughter is kosher, it is permissible for eating. Again, we shall see that the true meaning of the above words is not exactly what it appears from the surface meaning. There's much more going on here in the allusions of our Mishnah. But to go on with the pshat, the simple meaning, shchitas nohri, the slaughter of a nohri, that is a non-Israelite, is nevela. That meat has the category of nevela, which is the category of an animal that died not through being savaged by a predator, but died a death that was any other than shechita. And nevela is meat that is not permitted for Israelite consumption. The Israelite is allowed to give it to the Noahide who is permitted to eat nevela. the Israelite may sell it to the idolater who is also eating nevela. But nevela is not permitted for eating by Israelites, and shchitas nochri, the shchita, the same act of slaughter of the animal performed in exactly the same way, perhaps by an expert slaughterer, but he was a Nachri, he was a non-Israelite. His shchita is from the point of view of the Jew and the Israelite, nevela in the category of meat that may not be consumed. And nevela has an additional prohibition besides being unfit for consumption by Israelites, and that is that or metam or b'masor, it communicates uncleanliness through being carried. That is to say that not only if an Israelite touched nevela meat or a nevela animal, the cadaver of an animal, they would become ritually impure, and if they went into the temple in that state, they would be liable to karet, not only if they touched it physically, but also if it was wrapped up in a bag and wrappings and coverings, but they were carrying it, it would also render them unclean. That is a law of the Torah derived from book of Leviticus, and that is to say that the slaughter of a nochri, of a non-Israelite, has this category. However, it is not considered to be idolatrous meat. You might have thought that the Torah would rule that any animal slaughtered by a non-Noahide will be considered idolatrous. Our Mishnah is implying by what it says something that it does not say, which is that idolatry or an idolatrous sacrifice, not only would they communicate uncleanliness if somebody carried them, but if the unclean item was in a house or a room, it would communicate uncleanliness to other things in that same, under that same roof. That is not the case with regular slaughter of a non-Jew. It is not considered intrinsically idolatrous. Ha-shoichid balaylo, if somebody slaughters in the night and obviously we do not see, or he may not see exactly what he's doing. Likewise, a blind person, if the blind person who knew how to do it were to perform the slaughter, their slaughter would be keshera, would be eligible for consumption by Israelites. What about if somebody in slaughtering an animal violated a different law, ashochet b'Shabbos? If somebody were to perform the act of shchita on Shabbat, where shchita is one of the 39 forbidden labors of the Shabbat, which if the person did it intentionally, they would be liable to, if they did it with witnesses, to the penalty of getting stoned, and if they did it without witnesses, would be liable to the penalty of karet until they brought a sin offering. Hashochet b'Shabbat, if a person slaughtered the animal on Shabbat, over Yom Kippurim, likewise on the Day of Atonement, Afal pi shenischayev b'nafshoi, even though he is liable for his very soul, that is to say, he has carried out a prohibition which is punishable with the punishments of skila on Shabbos, of karet, excision on Yom Kippur, if done flagrantly and willfully, shchitosoi kshero, even so, that person's shchita would still be kosher, could still be eaten from. Now, our commentators tell us that this refers to the not the person who flagrantly violated the Shabbos in public. In such a case, the animal may not be eaten neither by him nor by anybody else. But where the act was performed mistakenly, for example, if the person did not realize it is Shabbos or Yom Kippur, where had the act been done flagrantly, there would be the very serious penalty. Where it is done by mistake, the law is that the actual meat that was correctly slaughtered may be eaten. Well, with that, let us go back again to the first Mishnah of Hullin, over the text once again, because the whole subject of shchita is profoundly deep. Here the Torah has given Noah permission to his descendants sustaining themselves with meat, and the children of Israel are told in Deuteronomy that they may eat meat, and that is our nutrition coming at the expense of the life of the animal. It's a very holy thing to take the life of the animal to sustain the soul of an Israelite. Indeed, in the Kabbalistic text, Sharei Orah, the gates of light, by the 13th century Spanish Kabbalist Rabbi Yosef Gikatilia, of which I have a full series of audio translations on his Amra website. There he says in the gate of Gevurah, the gate of divine strength and power, that God struck a deal with the animals that if they would permit their bodies to be used on the altar and for human consumption, this would give the animal an elevation beyond the level of animal which the animal could not have attained without this their being slaughtered either on the altar or for the table of Israelite consumption through shechita. And let me say at the outset that no form of specific practice of slaughter applies to fish. Fish, if they die by being taken out of water, or if, for example, a fish was taken out of the water and had a blow to its head, for example, to put it out, the fish is permitted for slaughter, for consumption by Israelites, by the Torah. Shechita applies only to animals in the two categories of behemah, the three permitted species of oxen, cows, of sheep, lambs, rams, etc., and goats, and then the seven kinds of chaya, which are the animals that roam free, like the deer and the other related species that the Torah permits. And a kosher shechita to a non-kosher animal, were it a rabbit or a hog or some other animal, would not render the animal kosher at all. And a non-kosher shechita to any kosher species of animal does not render that animal fit for Israelite consumption in any way. An animal that was even correctly slaughtered by a non-Jew, let alone through a bullet to the head, through a stabbing, or through some other form of the taking of the life of the animal, that is in each of these cases, all of those cases, nevela and may not be eaten. And we need to know and to understand the difference between the method of shechita and other methods of ending the life of the animal for human consumption. And the quickest way to put it is that the goal of shechita is to have a perfectly smooth cutting edge on the knife, perfectly smooth, that enables the knife to be drawn across the throat of the animal swiftly, sinking deep in as it is drawn across without any undue pressure, but simply drawn across a razor-sharp knife and swiftly cuts the windpipe and the gullet of the animal, thereby cutting off the main life support system by denying oxygen now to the body and to the brain, and denying sustenance through food, through the gullet. We have thus irreparably cut off the life of. There's no such thing as sewing a head back on, the throat back together, and bringing the person back to life. And shchita also must cut the jugular veins of the animal, which supply blood from the heart to the brain, and this way the life of the brain is very swiftly terminated. So the correct performance of the act of shechita requires, for one thing, a cutting edge that is perfectly sharp and smooth. It must not have any nicks or any kind of hook extended from the, like a saw, because this would pull the skin of the throat of the animal, the bird, as it is drawn across, and this pulling is likely to lead to the wrongful termination of the life of the animal, and our tradition forbids any kind of nick in the knife, to the point that the shochet has to very carefully test his knife. It's not a regular knife, it's a knife that is prepared for the act of shechita by the experienced shochet, and before he will even slaughter with it, he will show it to the rabbi or the expert for checking. And immediately prior to the act of shechita, he will test the knife by running his fingers along it, back and forth, his fingernails and the flesh of his finger, to feel that the knife is completely smooth before the act of shechita. And that applies to the knife itself. The act of shechita is governed by 5 laws. These 5 laws are the foundation of understanding of the Mishnahs that we will be studying in the continuation. And these laws are not formally set out in our Mishnah. For these laws to be formally set out, we need to go to Maimonides' Code, where we find them set out in the beginning of the laws of Shechita, in the book of Kedoshim, of Kedusha, of sanctity, and there the closing section, which deals with the laws of food and drink, he deals with the subject of the slaughter of animals in a more formal and analytical way than our Mishnah. But I would like to go through the 5 laws of shechita, because the knowledge of them, which is certainly required of the shochet, the slaughterer, is fundamental to understand what is going on in these coming Mishnahs. So the first of the 5 laws is referred to as shehiyah, waiting or pausing. It is not permitted to pause in the act of shechita for the slightest amount of time. It has to be done in one swift act. You can't half cut the throat and then stop, raise the knife, and then carry on. It has to be a continuous act, and without any interruption. Now, I'm going through these in a very general way, and you surely understand that all of the details of this subject are subject to immense discussion in the law codes, based upon the extensive discussion in the Talmud Hullin on our Mishnah. And our purpose here is to understand the principles of Torah law. And it's understanding these 5 laws. First of them, the law of no shehiyah, no waiting during the act. It must be one swift, continuous act without pauses, without intermissions. The next is the prohibition of drasa, of pressing. A bird, for example, that swoops down on a little lamb, a bird of prey, and drives its claws into the lamb to grip the lamb, kill the lamb, preparation for eating the lamb, is said to be dores. It uses its claws to press in. And shechita is not pressing the knife like you'd press on a cucumber or you'd press on a carrot to slice the carrot. The act of shechita has to be a smooth drawing of this razor-sharp knife across the throat, so that the speed of the sweep with the natural weight of the knife, without its being pressed, with simply the drawing action, that is what cuts into the throat of the animal and severs the kaneh and the veshet, the windpipe and the gullet. The third is the prohibition of halada. In Hebrew, hulda is a rat or a burrowing creature, like a mole that burrows into the ground. And halada would be the burrowing of the knife in under the skin and being concealed during the act of severing the animal's neck. It is not permitted for the knife to be not completely visible from beginning to end. The knife must all the time be absolutely visible. It cannot be burrowing under, so something's going on underneath that we cannot see. The slaughterer has to actually be able to see the knife, and that is expressed in the prohibition of halada, the third of the five, that is digging the knife under, burrowing under the skin inside the throat. The fourth is called hagrama. Hagrama means dragging of the knife outside of the permitted area for the severing of the throat. I'd like to show you an illustration in one of the very beautiful, helpful texts that comes to make our life in Hullin easier, which does illustrate the correct place for the actual act of shechita on a cow. Well, here you have before you an illustration of the neck. This is from a commentary on the Talmudic Tractate of Hullin, which expands the discussion on all of these Mishnahs to cover all of the areas. The illustration right now is just intended to show you in general terms where the act of shechita is to be performed, at the ideally where the dotted line here is coming across on the well over the windpipe and well under underneath the actual back of the mouth of the cow, and the entrance to the windpipe and to the we shall see there's we'll not go into them in detail, but there are detailed rules about not catching the above the upper ring of the windpipe. And hagrama, the prohibition that I've been mentioning, would be where the knife was drawn out even slightly from the permitted area for the correct shechita to take place. So that is the fourth of the five. And finally, there is the prohibition of ikur. Ikur, from the Hebrew root la'akor. Akor is to uproot, would be severing the gullet and the windpipe, but in the process pulling them out of their position so that the cut was not a smooth cut through them. Ikur would be to have the knife pulling them out of position and mutilating them, but not cutting them with the smooth cut required by shechita. So from these 5 laws, which are the basic laws of shechita, from these 5 laws, we see that the practice of shechita is the most humane of all methods of terminating the life of the animal, because the knife must not in any way catch at any point on the skin of the throat of the animal or on the area of the throat of the bird being slaughtered. The act must be swift. It must not be pressing and hacking into the neck of the animal. It must be, the knife must be visible all the time. It must be in the correct traditional place, which immediately severs the entire life support system of the animal or bird, losing very swift loss of consciousness because the jugular veins have been cut. There's no blood coming to the brain, and within a matter of seconds, the animal loses consciousness and its soul is rising up. The shechita is in the right place, and the animal is not torn by the knife, but duly slaughtered with a smooth cut. And one of the key things that the shochet must do when he is slaughtering the animal is make the bracha. The bracha is the blessing which is recited by the shochet before the act. Blessed are you, our Lord, our God, King of the universe, who has commanded us about shechita. This is the commandment we saw there in Leviticus chapter 12. As I have commanded you, as God commanded orally to Moses, according to this tradition. And that lends an entirely new meaning to the opening words of the Mishnah, Kol Shochatin. Everybody can perform shechita if they know this body of knowledge. It's an absolute requirement for anybody from whose meat we are going to eat, that they must know these 5 laws. And more than that, that they must have performed the act in front of experts, and we are sure that they are not going to faint. Because there are personality types that will simply faint on being faced with the challenge of terminating the life of an animal or a bird. That is just how some people are. Not everybody has the gevurah, the particular strength of character. Not everybody needs this gevurah. On the contrary, we consider the shedding of blood to be something that should not be widespread. And if it is, it should be, if blood is shed, it must be within the confines of the halacha of the laws of shechita. So the spilling of blood has its place here as a preliminary to the consumption of meat in the laws of the temple, because we are bringing the sanctity of the temple into our lives through the consumption of duly slaughtered meat. I'd like to just conclude with one extra comment on the concept of why the shechita, even the technically perfect slaughter of an animal by a nochri, would not be permissible to a Jew. The reason is the same as why a non-Jewish person that wrote and made a set of tefillin, that learned the script of the Torah and wrote on parchment with correct ink and made the correct houses for the tefillin, those tefillin would still not be able to be used by a Jew to perform the mitzvah of tefillin, because the commandment applies not only to wearing the tefillin, but to having tefillin that are wearable to somebody who is commanded to wear the tefillin. And since the non-Jew is not commanded to wear the tefillin, it cannot be supposed that when he makes the tefillin, he is making them with the same intention as a Yisrael is making the tefillin. The same applies to shechita. Even though the technical act of shchita may be correct, the nochri, the non-Israelite, is not commanded to eat through shchita. And when he performs this act, we cannot presume that he has the same intention in mind as the Israel, the qualified and licensed shochet, when he makes the same act. But the difference is that he is commanded to do this and is doing it as a mitzvah. The other is doing it simply to terminate the animal's life without regard to the Torah. And with that, we conclude our introductory class on the Mishnah of Hullin. So with that, my dear friends, we will conclude our studies for today, and with the help of God, we shall be meeting in the Kollel on this coming Wednesday at the same clock time as we started. Please look at the schedule page on the Zamra website for details. And I wish you a wonderful and beautiful day. Shalom. Blessings from the holy city of Yerushalayim.